that is implying that there is a deeper meaning, that people don't just operate at face value. And, you know, maybe there was a time in your life where you can remember realizing for the first time that not everybody is what they seem to be, or not everybody is necessarily the person that they present themselves as, or the things that people say to you can't always be taken at face value. And so we start to learn that what somebody presents to the world, for whatever reason, isn't necessarily what's going on inside that person. And at probably about the same time, you will learn to present yourself to the world in such a way, maybe because that was more desirable to certain people or in certain environments, and you learned to be different in different situations and different environments. So, you know, you learn to be a little bit different when you're visiting your parents versus when you're in the bar with your friends. So we learn to adjust and to adapt. And have any of you ever had a job, maybe you've worked in an office or something like that, where something happens like a leaving party or a Christmas party or something like that, and somebody behaves in a way that's very different to how they behave in the normal day-to-day routine, and other people say, oh wow, that was we didn't expect that from them, and you know, we saw a different person, or we saw a different side of them. Have you seen that sort of thing happening? So we form we notice patterns in people's behavior, and we form judgments over time, and we label those judgments that person's personality. And this is one of the things I find really interesting about all these different personality profiles and psychometric profiles that we take, that what they're apparently trying to do is assess you as a person in isolation. But we're never in isolation. We're always operating relative to other people, because we are social animals. We are evolved in a social world, and we are, each of us, grown up within a social environment. We're inseparable from other people. And so describing your personality is your personality in a context, and it could be different in a different context. So, you know, some of you have jobs or have had jobs in the past where the person you are when you are performing that job might be very different to the person that you are when you're with your family and friends. I'm thinking, certainly I know Kerry, Mark, that I know of, probably Vicky as well in teaching, that, you know, and this is one of the things that I've read about since in the last 6 months, with people working from home more. I've read stories in the news about people seeing a totally different side to their partner, husband, wife, because suddenly they're not the person who's yelling at the kids and taking the kids to school and making dinner. Now they're this really serious business person, and they're on an online meeting with their boss or whatever, or with a customer. And so suddenly that workplace environment is transported into the home. And we're seeing that difference, that switch. Whereas normally when you're with a friend or your family, you create that relationship is creating the context. And so relationships are really critical to everything that we're doing. And without relationships, we wouldn't need to communicate. And so, for example, what Florence said about communication with family and people at work, that communication wouldn't need to happen if there wasn't a relationship there, and a relationship that he has a motive to protect or to improve, because we get some benefit out of that. So what we've got to start to understand, and this comes back to Mark's definition of NLP, is how is it that we're able to figure all of this stuff that's going on in the outside world and make these judgments and see these patterns and make our responses that other people label as our behavior or our personality? So what is it that what is it that makes that happen? Why do we have differences of opinion? Why do we have different interpretations, different judgments? You know, if we were all robots programmed with the same software, then if you went for a job interview, you only need to be interviewed by one person. I'm a trustee for a big school trust in the UK. And on Thursday and Friday and Monday and last week and Monday and Tuesday this week, we were interviewing for new headmasters in 2 schools. And there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, about 11 or 12 people interviewing the candidates over 2 days for each one. I think the second one, the final interview, there were 6 of us, or five of us interviewing one candidate. And then afterwards, we spent time sharing our judgments and our insights and our opinions and the things that we'd noticed in order to try and reach a decision that everybody was happy with. If we were all robots programmed with the same software, we wouldn't need to do that, because everyone would have seen the same things. Everyone would have come to the same conclusions. Everyone would have formed the same judgments. And we need that collaborative process. Now, we might say, well, that's good because, that's a good thing about being human, because, as I said about our group here in this training, that's great because we've, we all learn from each other and we get different perspectives and it's enriching and all of that sort of stuff. And of course, we would say that because we are human. And so, of course, we would try and find something good to come out of this this subjective way that we see the world. And one of the ways that I've heard NLP defined probably by Richard Bandler, one of the co-creators, is as the study of subjective experience. And what that means is, if we know that human beings perceive and interpret the world in different, unique ways, and if we know that those unique interpretations lead to different behaviors, and if we know that those different interpretations sometimes lead to conflict or confusion, and that creates friction, that creates inefficiency in getting things done, then if we could understand how those different subjective perceptions are working, then we could allow for some of those differences. So it's a little bit like on your camera or on your phone, you have a setting for something called white balance. And what happens is the camera doesn't see the world the same way that the human eye sees the world. So I don't think you can set it in Zoom, but probably even on the camera that you're using for this conference here. But, if you change the lighting in the room, you'll see the color balance, the color tone of the image will change. It might change to blue and then come back to something that seems natural again, or it might become more orange. And what's happening is the camera is trying to figure out what would a human eye be seeing, because our human eyes always adjust to sunlight, because that's what the eye evolved within. But sunlight's quite yellow, and if we go into a room that has very blue lighting or very orange lighting or red lighting or something like that, it can be disorienting. It's confusing. We can't see certain colors anymore because of the way that the vision works. Now, if we know that the lighting is blue, we'll compensate for it. We can adjust for it. And that's what the camera in your phone or your computer's doing. So if we knew how a person was perceiving the world, then suddenly we could make sense of their behavior. I'm sure you've had the experience where you've interacted with somebody or you've watched an interaction and you've just thought to yourself, I can't figure out why that person did that. Their behavior makes no sense to me. I remember a discussion in an HR forum on LinkedIn, I think it was, where somebody was describing 2 people at work and conflict between them. And it was basically 2 people doing a job share and they just refused to cooperate with each other. And all these people, different people were commenting, oh, you should do this, you should do that. Everyone's jumping in with solutions. And I commented and said, well, I think the first thing is you've got to understand what it is that they're gaining from that behavior. And she replied and said, well, they're not gaining anything. Well, it might seem that way, but for them to be putting that amount of energy into that conflict, they're getting something from it. And if we understand what that is, and we can find a different way of them getting that, then there's no need to engage in the conflict anymore. I mean, at the very minimum, we're all talking about them. So that's something that they're getting out of it. So one of the really important principles that comes out of this understanding of subjectivity, of if we know that people perceive the world differently, and so I don't mean just we see the world differently. We see it, we hear it, we feel it. The temperature seems different. We feel pain differently. And we make different judgments on those perceptions. If we can start to get a sense of how somebody's perceiving the world differently to us, then we can understand much more systematically how their behavior is different to ours. So at the most simple level, for example, in what Florent was talking about earlier, we can communicate more effectively. We can resolve conflict much more effectively. To come back to Vicky's example about anxiety. If we're looking at this from the point of view of subjective experience, what we get is these human beings are not behaving in isolation. They're not an anxious person. They are anxious in an environment, responding to certain things that are happening. And if we understand what they are seeing and hearing in the environment that's causing that effect, and at the first level, if we put ourselves in that position, that would make me anxious as well. If we were all dropped into an environment, if we were all had lived every moment of our lives with people who took care of every need, and then suddenly they took us somewhere else and abandoned us there with these people and these huge rooms and buildings and all this different stuff going on, all these other kids, I mean, I would be nervous if I didn't know what was going on. And as adults, and again, as Vicky gave a lovely example of trying to teach parents how to be teachers, when we drop adults into that situation, it doesn't make any sense. Oh, well, of course, well, it's fine. Just do this, just do that. Because everybody's operating from their life experience and the children are not. And so the first thing we've got to do is climb inside their experience of the world. And the very first thing we get from that is, oh, okay, yeah, now this makes absolute sense. If I was in this environment, that's exactly how I would feel. So part of the answer then becomes not, what do I need to do to this person to cure their anxiety? It becomes, what can I change in the environment that isn't triggering that anxiety? Because actually that's a normal response. One of the other things that we get from seeing experience of the world as being subjective is we start to understand that about the process of change. We can't fix or cure anyone because nobody's broken. And so one of the really important differences about NLP compared to other ways of working with people and introducing change is we're not trying to solve problems. We're not trying to fix anything that's broken. We're not trying to cure any conditions. What we're doing is we're taking a person who is working perfectly in a certain environment as they understand that environment. And we're changing the way that they perceive the environment, and we're changing the information that they have so that they work differently in a way that's more efficient, in a way that leaves them feeling more energized and happier with their interactions rather than tired and frustrated. I'm sure you've all had jobs where the working environment and the culture and the people you worked with was draining, and you would get home at the end of every day from a job that you enjoyed, but my God, the people just wear you out. Have any of you experienced a working culture like that? And this is the effect, this is the friction, this is the conflict of every, and there are cultures, working cultures, where even the smallest things become really, really difficult and complicated. Like, we've run out of tea bags. Okay, go to the shop and get some more tea bags. Well, I'm not paying for tea bags out of my own pocket. Well, okay, so you have to fill out this form then to get the money out of the petty cash to get approved by HR and 2 managers in order to, I'll just bring a flask, forget it. And everything suddenly becomes so difficult that you either give up and you just think, oh, I forget it, I'll just whatever, I'll fill out the form, I'll just go with the flow, I don't care anymore. Or you have to get out that culture in order to survive and stay sane. And it feels like such an alien way of thinking. So we've all experienced these sorts of things in life. And the question, of course, that we're all wanting to ask is, that's great, Peter. Yes, we're totally with you. We've all experienced that. What do we do about it? So, and psychologists would give it a label. They'd give it a name and say, you're suffering from whatever syndrome. Great. What do I do about it? Don't know. So NLP is very, very practical. For that reason, a lot of psychotherapists hate it, because it's not about diagnosing and labeling people and getting money out of insurance companies. It's about seeing everyone as normal within their reality. And if we want to help that person function more efficiently in a shared reality, then that's where we have to start, not looking at what's wrong with the person, but what's different about their perception of reality.